covered in, she said,
Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Tuesday, September 8th, 2015 to order. We will begin by singing of the national anthem and another song, God Save the Queen. This is to recognize Queen Elizabeth II's setting tomorrow the longest reigning monarch in British history. She's also our monarch, hanging here in the chamber. And so the clerk and I won't tell you what the CAO thought, but the clerk and I thought it would be appropriate to honor the Queen in this way this evening. So the clerk has provided not only the words for God Save the Queen, but also a beautiful photo of the Queen, and they have them here as well. So I would ask Councillor Papp to lead us in the singing of the national anthem. All who are able, please rise.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patron of, in all thy sons' command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen, send her victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the Queen.
Thank you, Councillor Papp. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for leading us in that. Thank you all. It has been moved by Councillor Rybak, seconded by Councillor King, that the agenda for the September 8th, 2015 regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest that any members of council may have. Do any members have any conflicts that they need to disclose? Can that be so noted that no members have expressed any conflicts? Next, we move to hearing of presentations, delegations. We have one delegation. It is by Mr. Bob Miller, who's representing the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara Foundation. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Mr. Miller.
Mayor Augustine, members of council, town staff, and members of the public. As Mayor Augustine has said, my name is Bob Miller. I'm the chair of the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara Foundation. And I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening about our annual Coffee Break campaign, which this year celebrates its 20th year. The Niagara chapter of the Alzheimer's Society originally inspired Coffee Break, which has evolved into the longest-standing national annual fundraising event that raises money to support the work of Alzheimer's societies across Canada. Thousands of coffee breaks are held annually, and since launching 19 years ago, this campaign has raised $18.5 million across Canada.
Great.
National Coffee Break Day is Thursday, September 17th, with more than 10,000 coffee breaks expected to take place across the country. In the Niagara region, our campaign will kick off on that day with the raising of the Alzheimer's Society flag and barbecue lunch at Brock University, hosted by this year's honorary chair, Brian Hutchings, Vice President of Finance and Administration at Brock. Members of the Niagara Marine Industry Charitable Council will be in attendance to jumpstart the campaign with their generous annual donation. Why is this campaign so important? Dementia is a progressive and degenerative disease which affects 747,000 Canadians today. And while recent trials of a drug that have shown that promising results could bring us closer to a drug that treats the disease in its early stages by delaying its progression, currently there is no cure. Within the next 20 years, dementia will affect 1.4 million Canadians and the family members or others who will be caring for them. Here in Niagara, there are currently over 8,800 people experiencing a progressive dementia, and this number continues to grow. Many experts have said that what cancer was to the 20th century, dementia will be to the 21st century in terms of its impact on our healthcare system and on the everyday lives of families. Statistics Canada shows that 8.1 million Canadians are caregivers, and of those, 6.1 million are in the workforce. Most of the caregivers are 45 to 64 years old, the group that also comprises the most experienced workers. A 2012 Conference Board of Canada study estimates the cost to employers in lost productivity because of caregiving responsibilities to be $1.29 billion a year in Canada. Dementia is also a health condition with important social implications that impact our communities. These can include the loss of independence, stigma, discrimination, as well as social isolation for those affected, as well as their partners in care. Our Alzheimer's Society mission is to advocate for people with dementia and their care partners living in the Niagara region and provide access to a diverse range of appropriate resources and supports throughout their difficult journey that will assist them in remaining independent in their homes and communities longer. Coffee breaks provide an opportunity to invite your coworkers, clients, customers, friends, family, or neighbors to come together to enjoy a cup of coffee or other preferred beverage at a break time or other social get-together in exchange for making a donation to support the work of the Alzheimer's Society. Coffee breaks can take any form you want. It can be a barbecue, it can be an open house, it can be a raffle, it can be a dress-down day. You can even have a wine party, which is something that my wife and I did for many years, being true Niagarans. Hosting a coffee break is fun, it's easy to organize, and a great social opportunity. Our society provides a free kit, while our hosts supply the people and place. Each kit includes coffee for that first pot, a donation box, and a promotional signage and literature. While many of the Alzheimer coffee breaks in Canada will be held on the National Day, you can choose a date that is more convenient for you, since the Niagara campaign runs from September through to December. All of the funds, and this is important, that are raised stay here in Niagara to support our local programs and services. Organizing or taking place in a coffee break event has the potential to raise awareness, encourage discussion about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, something we're all going to be talking about a great deal for the next 25 to 30 years. Reducing stigma and misinformation is an important step in improving the quality of life for persons living with dementia and prolonging their independence and sense of well-being. You can also go one step further in changing the lives of people living with dementia for the better by joining Dementia Friends Canada. Visit dementiafriends.ca, watch a video on what it's like to have dementia, then commit to an action that will better support someone with the disease. Now, every year, our local society in Niagara is required to fundraise approximately $600,000 of an annual budget of $1.9 million. Coffee Break is our signature event. Thanks to this council and over 200 hosts, we raised over $102,000 last year. This year, more than ever, we hope we can count on your support to reach our goal of $105,000. I encourage each of you to consider hosting your own coffee break event this year and make your coffee count. Anyone can register for a free coffee break kit by calling the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara region at 905-687-3914 or by visiting the website at alzheimerniagara.ca. Many thanks for your time this evening and your consideration to make a difference in the community today and provide hope for tomorrow. On a personal note, I can tell you that we have experienced in my own family just in the last year dealing with this. It's a very different kind of affliction to deal with. I'm sure there are a lot of people in this room who know somebody or have family members. I can assure you sadly that you're going to know many more friends and family members in the years to come. And it is really important, and I think the mayor particularly knows this from his own fundraising past, raising private funds, raising private awareness by people of what we're looking at. We do not have enough resources. European countries are clearly much better prepared than we are for dealing with what I would describe as an onslaught of people from my generation, the baby boom generation, that are going to hit this wall of many, many cases of Alzheimer's and other dementias. So it's very important for everybody to be aware of it, and we are trying extremely hard to ramp up our efforts to raise public awareness and public and private funds. Government, as we all understand in this country, does not. The support for healthcare is lacking for anybody who works in an association like the one I'm involved in. You understand it. So making people, particularly those who are faced with it, have to deal with it, friends or family, aware that we're there and we're there to help, but we need resources is very important. So on the last note, on a happier note, Mayor Augustine, I'm going to present you with your coffee break host kit. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Miller.
Coffee.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Before you go, I wonder if members of council have any questions for you? Questions for Mr. Miller? No questions? Councillor Papp?
Well, not a
Thank you.
question, Mr. Miller. I just thank you again, as always, every year. I spent 35 years of my career working in homes for the aged and nursing homes,
Right.
and I saw what can happen, and I must say that you're correct, it is one of the most, how could I say, difficult things to see a person, as it was described to be by my friends at Baycrest Geriatric. It's like watching the lights in a house go out slowly. And I was fascinated by the numbers, because I also am aware that of the 8,800 people that have been diagnosed, there's close to 10% that required institutionalization now. And those beds aren't available. So I know that you'll get our undaunted support. I've seen and witnessed the work that's gone on. And you're right, the caregivers are stretched to the ends. And I can't say enough.
The numbers are actually conservative, Councillor, because
I know
when
they
people
are.
when people have cancer, they don't hesitate to go for treatment or tell people. You know, when people living with dementia do not like to self-identify that. And I've had this experience many times of hearing about people, and even in my own extended family situation, where, you know, you have somebody, the person really resists it, you know, and it's a vicious circle, because they don't have the ability to understand where they are, but they do not want to be in that mode. So I suspect that if we've identified 8,800 people as having had dementia, that's not a real number. So again, we're trying to offer services, and we have great people working there, about 30 staff. We're trying to offer services so that the person has an easy, soft step into the system, so that they because when even the most hesitant people have had this personal experience, once they get their foot wet, or their toes dipped in, they see what a great thing it is, and they really get a lot of benefit out of it, aside from referrals to doctors for medications, which can at least retard it on a temporary basis. But anyway, thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments for our presenter? Thank you very much, Mr. Miller.
you.
We appreciate your commitment to the cause. And I believe every year we do host a coffee break here, and
Right.
we'll be turning this over to staff.
Okay.
They're going to be organizing it as part of their social committee.
Right.
And we'll be sure that all members of council be invited, and the community as well.
I appreciate you all doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Mr. Miller. I appreciate your presentation. Thank you. And it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved that the information presented by Bob Miller, Chair of the Alzheimer's Society of Niagara Foundation, be received. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again. You'll note that there is no regional report. Regional committee meetings were just up and running last week, and we have regional council this Thursday, so we can anticipate a report from Councillor Beatty and/or myself as required at our next council meeting. So now we move to adoption of minutes. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of the special meeting of council of August 10th and of the special meeting of council of August 31st, 2015. I do want to note that we did not conclude, or were not able to conclude the meeting, the meeting on the, what was the date of that? The 24th? 24th of August. That meeting stands in recess. We're hopeful that we can get to that meeting later this evening, and if we do, then we'll have the minutes at our next council meeting. But that's why those are there. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Should say the reason why we didn't finish that meeting because we ran out of time. So hopefully we'll have that opportunity this evening. Next, we move to consent agenda items for consideration. Are there any consent agenda items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? There being none, it's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Be it resolved, the following consent agenda items be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. 1. Recommendations from the Policy and Priorities Committee of August 24th, 2015. The recommendation that the recommendations arising from P&P of August 24th be received and approved. Then we have some minutes. We have the minutes of the committee meeting of August 24th, and also the library operating agreement, and the recommendation is, be it resolved that council receive the report and approve the library town operating agreement as presented. Next, we have staff reports of routine nature for information or action. And we have one item, and that is the proposed Pelham Transit fares, routes, and schedule. And the recommendation is, be it resolved that council receives the report outlining the proposed transit fares, routes, bus stops, and sponsorship program. The council approve them as presented. Then we have information correspondence item, thank you letters, various letters to Pelham summer staff. And the recommendation is that council receives the correspondence from Megan and Mike Bowes and Emma Quinn Bowes, Tom and Christina Disley, and Maria Tremere regarding thank you letters to the Pelham summer staff for information. Very nice letters. Letter from Enbridge Gas Distribution regarding the Energy East, and the recommendation is that council receives the correspondence regarding the Enbridge Gas Energy East program dated August 24th for information. And finally, committee minutes for information. There's one, be it resolved, the council received the issue summary report for the Community Beautification Committee minutes of June 3rd, 2015 for information. Any items that members of council would like to discuss? Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. I'd like to really comment on the 3 letters of thanks that were received. These are testaments that reflect the excellent work done by our staff in setting up and administering programs using the facilities that we do have. It's perfectly clear that our staff is capable and willing to expand these and other programs when expanded and new facilities are at their disposal. Public demand for Made in Pelham programs is at an all-time high, and we need to build upon the firm foundations that our staff is doing. We have 2 excellent programmers who are doing a magnificent job under the leadership of the director. This has to be recognized. Congratulations to these staff. Please pass that on. It's great to see how much the community appreciates the very hard work that the staff is doing and just how successful these programs are. It's just a great testament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And certainly when we do periodically receive thank you letters for the excellent work that staff do, and I'm always thinking that when there's one letter, there's probably another 10 people behind it that just didn't take the time to send in a letter or an email of thanks. So kudos to staff for that. Thank you for raising that.
Always ready to celebrate successes.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You are. Thank you. Any other comments on that issue or other issues? Councillor Kersey.
Not on that issue, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor. On the library agreement.
Yes.
And I apologize, I had intended to call the CAO prior to this, but I just ran out of time. Within the document, it refers to a Schedule A that is fairly common in commercial leases. It talks about the rules and regulations of the occupier of the space. In another part of the document, it talks about a Schedule A, which is really the Schedule A that we have in front of us, which is the more or less the operating agreement, the services provided by the town as part of the services to the library. So the point that I wanted to make was that perhaps if we don't want to have any specific rules and regulations such as you don't block fireways, et cetera, we should probably just strike that one clause out of the body of the lease, and then that would clarify the confusion with respect to the Schedule A that are referenced in two places, but are two separate schedules, in fact.
Thank you. Where's that first one that you talked about, the sort of boilerplate
It'd be
one? Is it
on page 22
22?
of the 360,
Yeah, okay.
and it's the
Second paragraph?
second paragraph.
Yeah.
And that's the rules and regulations that's a sort of a normal clause in a commercial lease. So if we're comfortable that the library would follow the rules and regulations, such as are normally envisioned in the operation of a property, we could strike that, and that would clarify the confusion. Otherwise, we should reference that as perhaps Schedule B and attach a set of rules, sort of common fire or safety issues, that sort of thing that are normally encased in a common lease. And I apologize for leaving this till last minute.
That's fine. Mr. CAO?
Yeah, that makes sense, Mr. Mayor.
Which option the councillors suggesting, either striking it or adding?
I would strike the reference initially and proceed that way.
Okay. Councillor, are you okay with that?
I'm
How would-
happy with
How would
that.
that be amended? Such reasonable rules and regulations shall be made by the town from time to time? And strike the rest, including the rules and regulations set
That'd
forth in
be-
Schedule
that'd
A
be
here too?
That'd be fine.
Okay. We should probably have that as an amendment, is that correct? So Councillor, would you be prepared to move that amendment?
I will.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
thank you. Then someone, Councillor Ribbiak, would second that amendment. The amendment is that the words, page, it says 22 in the second paragraph where it talks about shall be made by the town from time to time. It's the words here, including the rules and regulations set forth in Schedule A here too and. So that would be removed from the agreement, and then the agreement would proceed. Perfect. Is everybody clear on that? Okay. I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment carries. Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any other issues or discussion points regarding this agreement? Pleased to see it here, and the library did approve it. Library board did approve it. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to that, the library board did add one small clause at the very end of the agreement.
Yes.
Just to point that out to council, it is a bit of a change from what you saw. And they've asked that the library board and the council will review this agreement in its entirety once per term or at the request of either party as expressed by formal motion. And then it goes on to talk about Schedule A. That certainly was something that I talked with the CEO of the library, and we thought it was a good way to keep the agreement current, but also a way to resolve any disputes if some should arise that either party can ask to look at the agreement.
Good. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Any further discussion regarding the agreement? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion regarding any of the other items on the consent agenda? Councillor Papp.
Just quickly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the staff, thank you. We launched the transit system this morning, and I'd like these updates and just to watch to see how it unfolds over the next few months. A lot of positive responses. Still a little bit, we're trying for ridership, but that's the whole name of the game. So we'll keep advertising and promoting it through all our local media for people to use this as much as they can, so we can build the platform for hopefully a permanent intra-municipal transit system in Pelham. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Mayor.
very much, Councillor. Any others to the transit fares, routes, etc.? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you. I understand that there are plans for some sort of an event that might help publicize this. I wonder whether we can hear some details with regard to that.
Ms. Van Ravensway?
Mr. Mayor, yes, as council is aware, we have a temporary bus at the moment. We hope that our bus, the permanent bus, will be available and here September the 21st. We will know the week prior to, and the day of, we would like to arrange a publicity and have a couple of special guests as well, invited to kick off the rail transit system. And by that time, we are hopeful to have a closer connection for our Niagara College and Brock students as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Ravensway. Just to that date, it may not be the 21st. The special guest would be Minister Bradley, who's quite, I spoke to him last week, and he's wants to be here and wants to celebrate with the community. And also, since Councillor Durley took the charge of this, and Councillor Papp was there, and was there another councillor there? When they met with Parliamentary Assistant McGarry, I thought it might be prudent to invite
Councillor Kersey
Councillor
and
Kersey.
Ms. Van Ravensway and I were there.
Thank you. It might be appropriate to invite her as well. So that would likely occur on a Friday when the House isn't sitting. So that might be on the 25th. But those are still sketchy dates and times, and we'll have to solidify that. But we thought that meeting was so productive that we wanted to invite her and at least inform her office. So thank you. Anything further to that from council? Just a question. The routes themselves, so you did say that currently the way that they're going to the Seaway Mall, that is temporary, and we are trying to have that thorough connection, so it's important for the community to know that piece. And second, when this was brought forward to council, it was suggested that the routes are kind of changeable, I'll say, for the first little bit. And sort of once we get things going and it worked out and those kind of things. So would that includes what, timing, or does that include the actual routing itself? So for instance, I heard over the weekend somebody saying, well, you know what, maybe the route should go a little bit further south to pick up some of the neighborhood near the arena or something like that. Can you just comment on if folks are saying, hey, what about me? Can the route come closer to me, or give feedback? How would folks be best to do that, and are they a little bit malleable? Ms. Van Ravensway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. This is what I would call our temporary routes. And as you know, that we base these routes on our public consultation. Already, every day, we hear more and more of people that may be able to use a route if it came closer and so forth. We will be looking at the routes over the next week and a half, and meeting with the service provider and trying to accommodate as many as possible. As the morning and late evening schedules are a straight run, but as you can see, the midday schedule, we do take in a lot of the central areas around the arena and Pelham Street, Hay Street, and so forth. So I think that once people are used to the schedule, and if we can get more feedback, we may be able to accommodate more at different times. We will be looking at it over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, great. And if people want to provide the feedback, what's the best way in order to do that?
They can go on the website and there's an email there.
Okay.
Or they can call as well, our office.
Perfect. Thank you. The final thing is there were some questions at the local Avondale saying that folks were always going in there asking about it. This is in the western part of the town. So I provided a schedule to them and also put one up at the post office. Just wondering if there's plans to do that around the entire town. That type of thing. So there's people that are interested in it, they just didn't check out the website.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, of course, this was just produced Friday, this actual schedule, and it is hoped by the end of this week, if we think this is the one that we'll go with over the next couple of weeks, we will be producing additional and sending them out through the business community, and also obviously our offices as well.
Good. Thank you very much. Anything else on that transit? It's very exciting, and people are quite excited about it and talking about it, so it's great to see. Anything else on any of the other items on the consent agenda? There being none, I'm going to call the question on the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again, Ms. Van Ravensway, for the great work on that, and kudos to staff. Next is my report. There's a bit of an error there, so I apologize to you. Trying to look for my report here. It's the last item. So I did, along with CAO, participate in something called the Professional Innovation Advisor Designation Program with Simplexity. The CAO also wrote about this. It was a great educational initiative. And really the purpose is to help folks that are trained with this program to adapt the process to any situation and to successfully embed any internal or external innovation. So this is just really taking it to the next step, and it was a great program, and meeting others from across Canada and North America. There are only 7 of us, but to talk to them and interact and see how they're using it. Very, very actually impressed with how we use the program. And Mr. Bassett told us, Dr. Bassett told us that there's an upcoming session on strategic planning, and Pelham is well highlighted in that. And I know that in the CAO's report later on, you'll see that town staff, CAO, and especially the treasurer have been using that quite extensively with outside groups. So I did participate in that. Also on the 27th of August, wanted to thank the Pelham's Youth Advisory Council for hosting an outdoor movie night show, which showed Night at the Museum 3. That was a bit of a change of venue. It was at Marlene Stewart Street Park, and it raised funds for Kids Help Phone in memory of Tyler Grummett. Tyler's parents and sister were there as well. It included a public swim and live music. Thanks to all who organized it and who attended. They did compete with Elvis that evening, so there were some youth, but not, I don't know if they were down with Elvis or not, I'm not sure, but it was a great event. And really that's taking off of the rain date, which was from Summerfest. The error is here, the 1,000-ball challenge at Lookout Point Country Club. I just cut and paste here, but really, I think there's probably going to be an update of that from JJ the Pro at our next council meeting. Raised funds to support Wellspring, and he wanted to do something here at council, so we'll look forward to that at the next council meeting. So it has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Papier. Resolved the council receive my report from August 24th, 2015 for information. Comments, questions? Councillor Pap?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it'd be worthwhile for you and the CAO to circulate to us a program outline. I was fascinated by this professional innovation advisor training as it applies to both what we do as far as internal policy and procedure. I'd like to know what exactly the components were and how we'd be using it as a part of a not only how could I say, discussion and development, but also with external public policy. I'm really curious about that and see how that applies. And
Thank
of the
you.
people,
So we'll do that, and I would say that really the CAO was looking more internally, and I'll ask him to comment. I was looking externally and saying, how might we share this program, this process with other municipalities across Niagara and across the province? We've seen the benefit here. I understood that it was even used today for a very important issue in the community, and we've seen that it works. And so what I was working on was how might we move that beyond Pelham to Niagara Region and elsewhere. And I think the CAO, I'll ask him to comment, was looking at it a little bit more internally. Mr. CAO.
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, the PA training was a large component was working, as the Mayor mentioned, on your own fuzzy situation and then moving that towards a challenge map. It was broken into 2 components. One is what are you selling, or what are you selling to the customer? What are your customer looking for? And what are you doing as an individual to meet your customer's needs? So the area that I identified for myself was how might I continue to use the creative problem-solving process on a day-to-day basis, and from there developed a challenge map which had various elements in it, which was certainly a challenge for me. But I think that the point being is that the skills that I picked up were sort of enhanced skills of what we know, and in a in that very short period of time, incredibly valuable. And I've noticed a change in some of the facilitation techniques that I've employed since coming back that have really worked. And I think that's a big part of the value. The other thing is working with the senior management team to strengthen things that we currently need to strengthen. So we look at the way we do our monthly reports. They don't reflect the creative problem solving process. They reflect the call to order process. So when we fill out the templates, we're forced to think in a way that we're not really trained to. So in other words, we just simply fill out the fields and call to order, and then we're done. And I don't think it serves issues justice in the sense of the information that goes to council and the ability for council to digest that information, accelerating meetings and making good decisions. So I have had some discussions with my colleagues about how to change those things. So that's one example of what I learned and how we plan to implement it throughout the organization.
Thank you, but we'll certainly circulate the sort of the outline of the courses as you requested and give that to council. Councilor Powell.
Well, if I may, two very, very important points. It's not just circulating it, also for us to learn, particularly as we evolve it out into public policy sessions, whether it's our constituents or other broader issues that affect the municipality. Secondly, I'm very happy to hear that, Mr. CEO, that the ability to mold that type of that information to us, to allow us, as you say, to effectively not only manage our agenda, but to manage the decision-making process is vital. So that's why I was thinking later on that, I just read interesting articles in the municipal world. I'm thinking we are changing the methodology in which public policy at a local level is being undertaken. And I think a lot of people would benefit from learning some case studies and how we've applied those. Particularly, and I don't want to elaborate, but I think we need to bring that case forward, and particularly with the training that our staff and yourself have received, it'd be important for us to learn some of that training as well. And I'll highlight some that was done here recently that I was just thoroughly impressed by how our staff undertook it. And it affected people that were of a business caliber, who come from a variety of different, and they were extremely impressed because they had been used to, as the CEO said, traditional ways of doing things. So thank you, and I look forward to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Any others to my report? We will circulate that. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Now we move to staff reports requiring action. It's been moved by Councillor Junkin, second by Councillor Kersey. Be it resolved, the Council receives the issue summary report, Wellspring Way and Highway 20 Servicing Agreement, and the Council approve the agreement as presented. Any discussion? Councillor Kersey?
Just a question, Mr. Mayor, through you. I don't know who I should direct it to. Within the body of the document, it says the total cost is $523,140, 50/50 to each of the developers. And yet in the detailing of the expense, the total only comes to $478,571. Am I missing something, or was that a guesstimate?
There's actually, who can answer that? There's actually, I think, a more complete version in the bylaw version. So if you move ahead to the bylaw section, it includes a sheet, estimates for signal works, Wellspring Way. It includes estimates for another estimate here. So one was 261. There's another 222. Oh, you're saying adding those two together?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's another amount. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The expenses has been calculated by the region. This is a regional agreement, but they're only estimates based on previous quantities. We won't know the final amount until we go to public tender. So the premise of the agreement is to give the assurance to the region that the two developers, one being Town, second being the Allen Group, are committed to paying for that expense. And that expense, as per the cost sharing agreement, would be divided 50/50, and then other benefactors would make a contribution as future development comes online.
Does that answer your question, Counselor?
But more or less, so our LOC that will be filed is the 261,570? That there won't, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others to the agreement? Mr. CEO?
Just as a technical point, it's not a letter of credit. We don't post credit with the region. We would write a letter of
Like a commitment or something?
commitment
Yeah, okay.
to do it. So
Yep.
we don't physically post cash, just so
Yep,
council's
okay.
aware.
Yep.
So procedurally, we're saying approving it. If we approve it later on, and we're approving it in bylaw. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? So we'll be seeing this in bylaw, okay? Any other questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item has been moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Junkin. Be it resolved, the council receives the issue summary report over Parkland dedication East Font Hill agreement, and the council approve the agreement as presented. Questions, comments? Councillor Kersey again, and then Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The agreement's fairly straightforward. The thing that's lacking is an understanding of what land is being dedicated and where, and because there's a Schedule A that is supposed to be attached, I don't have it. Do we have any drawings or anything that would help us understand what we're committing to here?
Mr. CEO?
Yes, the Schedule A has not been completed yet because it's still being negotiated in the context of we're not exactly positive what dedication, total square area will be dedicated to us. It has to be done. We have to conduct a survey first so that we know the approximate land area, and then that will form part of Schedule A. The agreement itself is simply the town requires, or I guess the secondary plan indicates more land required for park development than what is the parkland dedication under the Act. So commercial, industrial land is 2%, and as you're aware, residential land is 5%. So it depends on what calculations you're using to determine how much parkland. The significant part of the parkland dedication, or over dedication rather, is in the area of what is known as Central Park, that's sort of to the south. There's a large area of park which would be, to orientate you practically, behind Wellspring, the proposed Wellspring development site. That large Central Park area is a lot more land than what would normally be collected through through parkland, but it is required to keep the integrity of the development intact and to ensure that the strategic walking trails and hiking trails and recreational spaces are maintained throughout the plan. So the way to compensate the developer for that is if they over-dedicate, that we provide credit to them in another area, maybe a DC credit or maybe another credit, so that they're compensated fairly. And it's a way of basically doing a land transaction in the context of the parkland requirement.
Thank you. Councillor?
So with some of these lands that are being dedicated to the town for parkland development, would they be lands that were basically undevelopable anyway and would have been recognized as provincially significant wetlands or fish habitat, these sort of things?
Mr. CEO?
No, not in this case. The provincially, or the environmental areas are further to the south in the sort of center of East Font Hill. The areas that are proposed to be taken by the town for parkland are prime developable land, primarily in the higher density residential area to the south of the Wellspring area. And it's land that is currently owned by the Allen Group that will be developed in the future as residential. It's premium land.
And recently acquired by, some of it's recently acquired, not historic, but recently acquired by?
Some of the land has been recently
Allen
acquired by the Allen Group, and again, they had a strategic interest, but also there was the requirement of the town to construct Street A that connects historic downtown to the East Font Hill development. That road is also integral to the Central Park development and connecting the two downtowns, and the Allen Group does own some of that land. So some of the trail network that you're aware, we've done the offset of the trail the pedestrian sidewalk and the biking path off of the road surface requires additional land, so that is counted as parkland dedication as well, including other areas within the development for the trail connectivities, et cetera. So there's a sort of a wide variety of land that we'll be expecting the developer to participate in the site master plan requirements.
Just for further clarity, Mr. CEO, maybe you can point out for the councillor where that, you talked about the southern land that's
It's this
developable?
Sorry, this entire area right in here.
So the green space area. Point that out for the other council colleagues.
This green area to the south here. It's a large park area.
Some of it does have a natural water course through it, and I think that was some of the basis of your question, councillor. But that's not included in the parkland dedication.
No, and the water,
Because that's undevelopable anyways, right?
yes, and the water course is, it's not a naturally occurring water course. It's basically a ditch that had been put in there by the previous agriculture uses, and we've actually moved it. So a water course, you can move it around to suit the development. It's not like it's an existing wetland where you can't touch it. So.
Does that help, councillor?
It does. I guess the only sense of discomfort I might have is that I'm not exactly understanding or clear on how much money we are committing the community to in terms of offsets. And I guess we really won't have that until we have the survey and we have a sort of a blocking out of it and an appraisal. So I'm just wondering whether it's wise on our behalf to approve a bylaw that would allow that to go forward, other than, you know, to approve it in principle, subject to the receipt of the final numbers and drawings. I just put that out there for my colleagues.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what other people might have to say about it.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have a couple other councillors that have signaled they wanted to speak or ask questions about it. Councillor Ribbiak and then Durley.
Thank you. My question, I think, is very close to Councillor Kersey's. I, too, was interested in knowing what value we were committing ourselves to. Also, a little bit about how it's calculated, and in particular, if what's anticipated is that both developers are contributing equally to the parkland, or is it really a function of where the green land falls by design and who happens to own that property is making the donation? Just a little bit of detail about that to understand it a little bit better.
Mr. CEO?
If I understand the question correctly, the Act requires any developer to dedicate a certain amount of land to parkland. So in the case of industrial and commercial, the amount is 2%. In the case of residential, it's 5%. The town does not delegate its own parkland. So in other words, we don't say we have to dedicate 5% of our land area to a park. Instead, what we have done is we have developed the secondary plan and the site master plan that clearly identifies the areas that we want to see as parks. And as part of the parks, also is included the value added amounts with regards to the bike lane and the pedestrian pathways, the trails, the connectivity. All of those things require land, and because that's an interconnected network throughout the entire development that connects the existing or the historic downtown with the new development, we have to have some way of securing the ability to acquire that land, and that's being done in this case through a dedication. So because a large part of the Allen's holdings in the area are commercial, they're only required a 2% dedication, but we require more land than that to achieve what council's already approved in the secondary plan and in the site master plan. So the developer, rather than us acquiring the land through cash, so we say the appraised value is $375,000 an acre, we're taking 0.001% of an acre, therefore we'll cut you a check for X amount of dollars. We're simply saying that it's an easier way to do the transaction through simply providing a credit to the developer for monies owing as part of the regular development process, i.e. it may be a credit on the development charge, it may be a credit on building permits. I mean, there's a number of different ways we can do it, but it's an alternative to a cash payment for that over dedication that we require and that's been mandated by council to acquire. The reason that we need this agreement now is because in order for us to begin the reference site plan work, the surveying work, the developer wants some assurance that council is before we go through this exercise, which is going to cost money, the developer wants some assurance that there would be the ability for them to trade credits against land as opposed to us just cutting a check. And that's the reason why we want to proceed with this now, so that we have that framework in place. As far as the schedules go and the cost of the land, we won't know until we get the reference plans done. We still have some design work to complete. We still, in the case of Street A, we still have some engineering that is very preliminary that we need to figure out exactly what the land that we're going to take and how much of that is for park and recreational purposes. So that work still needs to continue. But it's not an unknown in the sense that it is, again, clearly defined in both the plans that council has mandated that we abide by while proceeding with development.
Thank you. Councillor?
Okay, so one of the answers, I guess, is it's calculated by area times the value, and the value is 375,000 an acre, and that the location of the parkland is per plan, and the part that the developer is going to provide, he owns that part that's within the plan, and it's going to be more than the amount that is required.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, that the cost of the land, I used the 375 an acre. That was the cost of the appraised value at the outset of the project. So what we would do is, I believe it would be the value the day before the building permit is issued. So any works would be added to that value. So there is basically it would be the 375 plus cost of development that would determine what the price of that land was. If there in fact has been servicing, for example, some of the residential areas have not been serviced, so that wouldn't change. But some of the land would have an increased value because of the servicing that's taken place already.
Just digesting that, Mr. Mayor. So what you're saying is that the value of the land would have gone up because of the development on it, but it's parkland, or some of it is roadway, of course, and other things.
Some of it's trails.
So some of it will have been developed, some
Yes.
of it not. So,
Exactly.
okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hurley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Many of my concerns have been brought forward in this discussion, but I parallel the thinking of my two colleagues in that we're committing to a dollar amount that's still not known. Agreement in principle, or yes, we're going to do this, but really the amounts are, to me, very cloudy, and I'm having a little problem with saying we're going to give you X when we don't know what X is. And this is a concern that I do have. However, in principle, I see the benefits to both the Allen Group and to us in entering into a trade-off type situation like this. However, and you did say it's necessary now because Allen Group needs a commitment that we're going to do this. In principle, will they not accept the fact that, yes, we're going to do it, but not commit to some dollars? And again, we won't know these dollars until all this other work is done. So are we putting the cart before the horse, or is this premature, or is it necessary in order to get to the final end?
Thank you very much. Mr. Ciano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments. I think that we do know, or I would say that we do know what we are dedicating, or what the Allen Group is required to dedicate for parkland in a conceptual notion, and that is, again, everything that's been outlined in the secondary plan and also specifically in the detailed site master plan. So there are no surprises in the sense of, oh, by the way, we're going to have to pick up another park over here for another 3 acres of land. I mean, so there's certainty in what we're acquiring. What the uncertainty is, because it's right now conceptual, the rough areas have been laid out. We don't know the specific surveyed areas, so it's hard to put an exact dollar value. We can estimate on it, but we don't have the reference plans done yet. So in order to commence with the reference plans, we want to have the framework in place on how the transactions are going to work. If there is some level of uncomfort from council, what I might suggest is that you go ahead and approve the agreement with the condition that once Schedule A has been developed and costs are known, that I report back to council with a clear reporting, so that if there is any remaining questions of council, that can be answered at that time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is pretty well what Mr. Richardson from Sullivan Manny has said in his letter responding that legal description will follow shortly, so that will provide all of the answers. In principle, we're doing this, we'll know the money when Schedule A comes back. That's the whole scenario here, so I'm fully understanding.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Pelham.
So based on that, do we need to execute the agreement on a bylaw?
So, Mr. CEO, what are you
Legally-
recommending?
Legally, I just need to know, Mr. CEO, if in fact, and I'm oversimplifying, but if the agreement is such that council and the developers come to some written direction, subject to the final terms being outlined in Schedule A, or is it absolutely, is this standard practice to move ahead with the bylaw? We're still not sure of what we're actually getting into. I just need some help on that.
And as you answer that, I think some councillors have used a proven principle, and you may not have said that. So repeat as well what
Yeah,
you
just give us
indicated.
what you're looking for.
I want to assure council that this agreement has been vetted thoroughly through our legal counsel. Pelham has been a part of all the discussions with regards to this and has recommended that it be approved. I would say that this agreement needs to be approved by council. But I would also say that once the details of what the specifics are with regards to value, and again, you have to remember that that won't happen until the day before the building permits are issued. So we wouldn't know that for some time, and I would suggest that, and that is a standard practice. So if the council's concerned that they want to know what the value would be, well, that value won't be determined until the day before the building permit is issued, which will then be too late to put the agreement in place. So I think that the agreement needs to be put in place, and that that we follow the process that's been outlined. And again, I certainly will bring back all of that information once it's been determined.
Councillor?
Well, you're right, and come to think of it, I stand corrected for myself. Bylaws aren't etched in stone. You can always bring them back, and you can always come back and amend. So if we understand that and we're comfortable with that, then I think we can move forward comfortably, and knowing that if there are some changes, particularly Schedule A, you'll bring those back as part of an amendment to the bylaw. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you. Any others for the first time? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further question, I'm certain that the CAO and the Allen Group have had discussions as to the quantity of land that we're talking about ballparking, not to the millimeter, but are we talking 3 acres of overcommitment? Are we talking 1 acre? Are we talking a half an acre? Sort of, I'm sure that you've had at least some preliminary understanding of the type of size of commitment that the Allen Group is making.
The overall dedication, and please don't hold me hard and fast to this,
I get it.
because I'd have to go through and calculate all of the little nuances, but in general, I believe it's in the order of about 2 acres of land throughout that development that would be dedicated. And again, I would reiterate that in the agreement, particularly around Section 4, again, it clearly outlines that the purpose of calculating the excess dedications. There's a number of things that have to happen. Again, the appraised values the day before the issuance of the building permit. There also has to be a draft plan depicting the municipal lands for purposes of the appraisal. All of that work has to be done. So all of those provisions are within the agreement that I think that provides that level of comfort as far as the process goes and how it's being handled.
Councillor?
So approximately 2 acres is overcommitment?
So that
Over
would be,
dedication, or that's total?
Total, I believe, required specifically for the trail network and the Central Park component.
And then minus his 2%
Right.
and any other component from
And
the
then what the
residential?
calculation would be on the residential side at the 5%.
Okay, well, that sort of helps to quantify the thing, so that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about, again, just some fact-finding in terms of Clause 4 here and the way in which it's done. Is there a bit of a difference to how it might be done in the existing bylaw. It says notwithstanding provisions of bylaw 2682, 2005, determine the value of dedications contained, and it outlines how that's done. Why does it say notwithstanding the provisions of the bylaw?
Because I believe that it is a reference to an existing bylaw for excess dedications. So those provisions are there. These are additional provisions required on top of what the existing bylaw states.
Does it differ from the provisions of the existing bylaw?
No, it adds to it, I believe.
Okay, that's helpful. The other is, I guess, council, what I'm sensing is some councilors are concerned that we're agreeing to something, and now we know a general ballpark. It's a similar clause, is it not, that we ask developers, somebody doing a subdivision, and we say, by the way, there's a parkland dedication, and that you shall adhere to it, and they go, okay, but I don't know how much it is. Isn't that similar? And we say, well, how are we going to know how much it is? Well, when the building, ready to issue the building permits the day before the value, et cetera. So it's similar provisions to what we ask the development community to do, and say, here in this draft agreement or the draft plan of subdivision, these are the provisions that are required. So is it similar? Is it a good way to think about it that way?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. The other thing too is that it's not always a land dedication, it may be a cash in lieu dedication. So oftentimes the developer will present an appraisal to the town based on what they figure the value would be. Sometimes we accept it, but sometimes we don't. We say we don't accept the value of the appraisal. We want some additional justification. So there's always that a little bit of negotiation with the developer at the time of the dedication.
Okay, that's helpful. Anything further? You ready for calling of the question? Yep. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Good discussion. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Junkin. Be it resolved, the council receive the issue summary report, OCIF, expression of interest, Station Street safe drinking water main replacement, and the council approve the completion of the OCIF expression of interest for the Small Communities Fund initiative for Station Street safe drinking water main replacement, and the council declares that the information that is provided in the expression of interest is factually accurate. Comments, questions? Is there any, Mr. CIA, you want to add to?
Just for council's information, Mr. Mayor, that it is indicated in the report that we've worked with the CS group. I know that had been an issue that council had addressed previously. Just to report and follow up on that, if council approves this tonight, we will be sending it to them for review of the content to maximize the effectiveness of our application, which was part of their contract. So we'll be following through on that if council approves this.
Okay, thank you very much. Others? Just quickly, Mr. Seo, this is or maybe it's Ms. Clementio, this is a total rework of Station Street in the section, is it between Port Robinson and 20, is that correct, or does it extend further? And it includes the getting rid of the ditches, putting in an urban cross-section, et cetera, which is obviously important for the community. Is there anything in there, I didn't see it, but anything on trails? There's the Steve Bauer Trail. How would that be part of this, or is that part of this? Just wasn't stated in the capital asset plan later on.
It wasn't specifically addressed with this budgetary quote using the new urban cross-section, so it's got the wider sidewalk.
Oh, it
this
does.
is under the secondary plan, so it's not a traditional urban cross-section, but nothing specific to the trails in question. It was just a per meter price factored out for what needed to be done.
Okay. I think that's helpful, though, if we're using that as a design standard, because I know that lots of folks use the Steve Bauer Trail in that area, and it's a little, I'll say, rough. So once those ditches are buried, then we can put the trail over top of that, and that's great. I think you've answered the question. Anything
Hood's
further?
not right.
Pardon?
I said my hood's not right.
I think some members, or one member of council, I think, walks that quite often, so. Anything further to that? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks for the work on that. We look forward to working with CS Group as well as our government representatives to try to maximize that support from upper levels of government. Now we have moved by Councillor Kirsty, second by Councillor Papp. Be it resolved, the council receives the issue summary report, Town of Pelham Capital Asset Management Plan, and the council approve the Town of Pelham Capital Asset Management Plan. I'm going to ask the treasurer just to make some quick comments on the plan. Please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As council will recall, at the last meeting of council, it was discussed that this would come as a preliminary update to the capital asset management plan, just to ensure that we have the two projects that are being applied for under the grant application embedded into the plan. The plan is nowhere near complete. It has not been updated to the new strategic plan as well. But it is a living document, as the government has acknowledged. And as we update and continue to update, and I had given the date of December 31st for the very comprehensive plan that we're working on, we will then resend this document to the province for their information.
Thank you. That's helpful. Questions, comments from Councillor Kirsty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, kudos to staff to put this together. It's a tremendous amount of work, but it will be a very powerful tool as we move forward and really incorporate this into our budgetary process. And as you say, I'm very pleased to hear that it's a living document. It's something that will be revisited on an annualized basis and updating the priorities and all of that. And so when it comes to capital planning, budget planning, and to some degree even operating planning, we've got a reference document that has been well maintained and it will only become a very powerful tool and maintain itself as a very powerful tool if it's kept updated. And my hope is that that will happen. I believe it will, and I look forward to using it, and it will help to put our community, or keep our community at the level that it is, or raise it above from where it is now in terms of capital management. So very thrilled to see it. Thanks for the great work.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Others? Councillor Papp and then Ribiak.
Well, echoing what Councillor Kirsty said, I'm going down to the area called analysis. I call it analysis, and I lost the clinical term is prognosis. Because when you read this, that sets the stage for us when we read it, and I'm not trying to oversimplify. I'm looking at the buildings. That this is critical because in many situations that some of us have been involved, including we've always reached the point where it's reactive. A building is falling down to the point where you have to replace it, and it's not met code. This sets the stage and puts us on, and future councils, that you need to deal with this. When those words are used, critical, poor, I'm not trying to overstate it. That's sending a message to you that if you don't pay attention to it and don't put the money and don't set that aside, you'll be in deep trouble and find yourselves in a position where, you can't handle it. So this means very, very critical to part of our budget planning and how we set our rates for taxation, for what purposes, and people need to hear this up front. So I'm very respectful and great work, and that's what that paragraph just struck right out at me. It said, pay attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. And I think using it as a living document, I think some of this councillors around the table know this piece, and we've reacted to it. So things like moving ahead on the Maple Acre replacement committee and all that, which is starting up. Even looking at this building, looking at other buildings, looking at trying to do something with the arena, for instance, which of course is in this mix as well when one talks about facilities. But it can be an even more powerful tool to identify things, early and make sure that we're reacting and acting to it and ahead of it. And I did actually have the conversation with the treasurer today that we, things like hiring a facilities manager to oversee these things as an example, we are getting ahead of it. So here it is. If we didn't do any of that, this would be the reality. We'd have to react, but we are being a little bit more proactive on it. The treasurer just wants to respond to that. I'm going to turn to Councilor Ribbiak.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to further bring this to the capital budget process, we did plan on using this document this year for that. One of the things that the province is being very critical of is making sure that we are maintaining this document and using it as part of our process. And that will allow us to stay focused on those items that are critical and priority, and why did they meet that requirement to be repaired or replaced in the year that you're working on. So those are all the things that they're looking for, and I think it'll be a great tool for council to use as well as following those guidelines.
Thank you. Anything further, Councilor? Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I echo the sentiments of both councillors that went ahead of me. I think it's an excellent tool, very professional, allows staff to make decisions based on data, and of course the urgency adds a dimension to the decision making. I did have a question with regard, just for comfort, a question regarding the definition of some of the terms, and I'm looking as well as Councillor Pat did at the graph that shows the condition of the buildings. And of the 16 buildings that we have, 10 are listed as critical. But then, of course, the documentation goes on to describe a series of projects to be budgeted for over the next 10 years. So I guess my question is the criticality of that, I guess the degree of criticality. I take it that if those projects are pursued and completed, the criticality of that condition will come down substantially. It's not a case of these buildings are critical, they're on life support, and we better replace them soon. Just give me some spectrum within which to understand exactly what the definition of that is.
Madam Treasurer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is this in relationship to the buildings?
The building ones in particular, that's as good an example
So
as
this
any.
was through the facilities condition indexing, and they have their what meets critical, and critical is exactly what you indicated. It's not prohibitive to repair. It's something that needs to come to the forefront of repairs. And if we took the list of projects that had been brought forward by the facilities manager this year, it was a long laundry list of items, but we picked the ones that are the most critical to bring forward to council, which we'll continue to do through the affordability piece of it as well. And then what we're doing is embedded into this document is going to provide you with those terms, with the decisions on what rates them as fair and good and critical and those kind of things. Those are the pieces that I think are missing in the document still. And then we have things like the bridge inspections that must be part of this process if you were going to apply for a bridge project, for instance. So all of those pieces are going to come, and the inspection reports and those kind of details are going to also be embedded in this document. It just gives more information also, not just to council, but to the public, so they understand why certain projects have come to the table and what the urgency is of getting them completed.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's excellent. Just out of curiosity, is there one step beyond critical, or is critical the absolute limit?
That term is called prohibitive to repair.
Okay.
So that means demolition, typically.
Okay, so there would be one, and
There would be one.
that would be in the graph as well, and we hope it's always zero.
We hope it is,
Okay,
yes.
so that gives us the extremes within which the spectrum falls. That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked a question of the treasurer over the weekend. I saw that there were no recreational buildings that were included there, the arena or the pool or that, and I was given the answer that they're zeroing in on those things which are now eligible for grants and recreational facilities aren't at this particular point in time. My question is, if in fact the living document gets the recreational buildings added to it, would costs that are expected to be rendered towards those buildings, could that budgetary amount be used in favor of us looking to get grants, like saying we need to do the critical, but we need to spend some money on things that aren't grantable? So if in fact the budgets are strained because we're needing to do things that aren't grantable, would that help us in a case of something that may be grantable?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. Right now, the grants are concentrating on the roads, bridges, and water mains and wastewater infrastructure. So this is why we brought these 2 grant applications forward. Those are things that we need to get done. But by doing that and getting grant dollars for it, frees up some funds for other areas, which would be in the recreation area or other areas that are not embedded. This document was created originally to deal with those items, the roads, the bridges, the water mains, infrastructure and stuff. But we are going to be embedding all of the assets of the town into this document. And once we do that, we'll probably just have to pull out sections to bring it to council because the document will be so large, as you see, it is already large. And then you can approve different sections as we update and so forth, given that the rest of the document remains the same. But we're always looking to free up whatever monies we've had that would be from reserve, affecting the debt ratio level or the debt repayment level for us, so that we can utilize the funds that we were going to use in that area on things that aren't necessarily grantable. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, it gives me the insight, and certainly it's a valuable tool. Kudos to staff. It's there's a lot of work that's gone into it, and a lot of work that still has to go into it, but it's going to be a very valuable tool for us.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any others? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Papp?
Sorry, just to be quick, it just brings to mind, and my colleagues can help me, the session that we had with the guest speaker, Ben Arish, the economic advisor, that his message was very clear. Not only just be focused on grants and borrowing, save for it. And I just resonates with what we were talking about previously, that I think it's very important that Madam Treasurer, Mr. CEO, when you come back with these, that another underlying principle is if you want these things to happen, you may have to put some money into it. And I'm being very general on that. And that's the message that he was trying to get across to us about growing debt and infrastructure. He said somewhere along the line, and going back to Councillor Durley's point, where we need trade-offs, and if we know we can move the money around in such a way to minimize tax impact. But at the same token, not everything comes for free. You know, it comes from somewhere, and his message was, you may have to contribute a little extra just to help that out. And that's something that some municipalities have done, and have done it successfully. And that builds your reserve, builds and softens the blow, if you want to call it.
Resiliency.
The resilience, exactly, Mr. Mayor. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Papp. Any others? It was a good session, actually. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Be it resolved, the council received the issue summary report, SCF, Expression of Interest, Hurricane Road Disaster Mitigation. The council approved the completion of the capital program Expression of Interest for the Small Communities Fund Initiative for the Hurricane Road Disaster Mitigation, and the council declares the information that is provided in the Expression of Interest as factually accurate. Questions, comments?
Do it. Straightforward.
No questions, comments? It's straightforward. Is what I heard some of the councillors were saying. We ready for calling of the question? Thanks to staff for putting this
Great.
together. Important project. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we move to bylaws. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaw, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass the same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 3648, being a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a memorandum of understanding agreement attached to and forming part of this bylaw between the corporation of the Town of Pelham and the Pelham Public Library for operational purposes to provide efficient and fiscal library services to the residents of the Town of Pelham. And council colleagues, I'm going to say that that is as amended because of the earlier discussion that we had. So as amended. Number two, bylaw 3649, being a bylaw that authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement respecting services between the regional municipality of Niagara and Fawn Hill Gardens, Inc. and the town of Pelham to carry out certain improvements upon lands related to the East Fawn Hill development as described in the agreement attached thereto, forming part of the bylaw. Three, being bylaw 3650, being a bylaw that authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute an excess parkland dedication agreement between the corporation of the town of Pelham and Fawn Hill Gardens, Inc. To credit Fawn Hill Gardens for a dollar amount equal to the excess dedications, which may be used to satisfy the payment of any fees, costs, and other amounts that may be payable to the town as part of any development or construction in the town as outlined in the agreement attached therein, forming part of this bylaw, and we understand that some of that will still be coming to us. in terms of the millimeters, as I think is one council used, exactly where those lines are. Any further discussion on any of those? I'm going to put as amended here. Are we ready for calling of the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we move to the confirming bylaw, which should have been before adjournment. It's been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. Be it resolved, the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Bylaw 3651, 2015, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Pelham, its regular meeting held today, 8th day of September 2015. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And it has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for Monday, September 21st, 2015, unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned. Let's take a brief 5-minute recess. Thank you. That's great.